We're going to be connecting the dots. And this is actually a testimony to this group that I feel comfortable enough to share some of these things. So there's not every group I could probably share some of these things with. So I just tell you the appreciation that I have for each of y'all, and that we can discuss multiple possibilities here. And one of the things that I do is I throw out theories, don't I, Abby? Yep. So we're going to be considering a theory here, and it's not that there's not other possibilities here. This is just, a few theories that are still being worked on and still being worked out. And that's the thing about pursuing truth. In our lifetime, we don't ever quite get there. But our lifetime adds to other lifetimes and to other generations. So the things that we do in our generation affect others. All right, let's get started. So, many times, when you're driving down the road, sometimes you go, how did I get here? And where do we go from here? Many times that's true even in our own lives. Boy, I'm getting some new curveballs thrown at me. What do I do with this? And what I'm suggesting tonight, let's take a journey together and go through the perils of history. And I think perils is the right word. History has often been described as the lie most believed. We want to arm ourselves with knowledge so that we can hopefully help us to make better decisions going forward. Because a lot of times your decisions are based on how good your information is. And in this world we live in, how good is our information that's normally coming to us through the media?
Not good.
Not very.
Not good. There you go. So we really need to arm ourselves, don't we, Linda, with additional knowledge to be able to counterbalance some of those things. So if part of what we understand is lie, then your decision-making capabilities are going to be hampered, to say the least. All right, who's familiar with George Oswald? Orwell. That's the Oswald. Orwell, thank you. All right, and it's interesting. I guess his pen name was that, but his real name is Eric Arthur Blair. So, in 1984 quote, it says, "Who controls the past controls the future. Who controls the present controls the past." So, who's in control of the information that we have coming to us these days? Any input there?
Can you repeat the question?
Who's in control of the input that we have coming at us through normal channels? Let's just put it that way. What's that?
The winner?
I think it's probably a combination of a few people that are scattered around the world.
Yeah.
Remake.
Yep. We're probably getting closer. Another quote from the 1984 book that he wrote is, "The media is the opposition party." Yep. War is peace, freedom is slavery, ignorance is strength. So another thing that he wrote, all political thinking for years past has been vitiated in the same way. People can foresee the future only when it coincides with their own wishes. And the most grossly obvious facts can be ignored when they are unwelcome.
Yes.
That's correct. So this is the reason I find if I run many parallel theories concurrently, it helps me from being in this condition where I'm unwelcoming the facts because they don't agree with what my wishes are. Now, someone else that, at that same time period, is it Aldous Huxley? Am I saying that right? Yeah. Okay. Author of Brave New World. In a letter, as I understand it, was written to George Orwell after 1984 was published. And he wrote, "Within the next generation, I believe that the world's rulers will discover that infant conditioning and hypnosis are more efficient as instruments of government than clubs and prisons, and that the lust for power can be just as completely satisfied by suggesting people into loving their servitude as by flogging and kicking them into obedience." All right, and probably not going to go into this, but in this particular part of 1984, I'll read that towards the end. The object of persecution is persecution, it says in the book. The object of torture is torture. The object of power is power. Now do you begin to understand? And this was the main character in the story is being persecuted at this point. But this is conditioning.
Blankets.
So, just like I mentioned, I'm finding that I've got to keep multiple theories concurrently running when I don't know what the truth is. And that is helpful, for me at least, in finding what the truth is. So, as I'm able to disprove a theory, then that's one thing that's not running concurrently. But until I can disprove it, it's still running in parallel. All right, let's look at, this is Jacob's blessings to his sons. Yes, sir.
Do you want and or need the overhead fluorescents? I have some lamps, and we've got some folks that the fluorescents are really screwing them up.
I don't need it.
Okay. Because I actually think this might be better.
It's seen better. Okay.
Seen better without the fluorescents.
All right. Okay. So, in Jacob's, blessing to all his sons, and in fact, it's interesting. Some of the blessings I go, those don't sound like blessings. For instance, Simeon and Levi, and they would be dispersed amongst their brethren. That's kind of a little more of a curse, and that was a curse to really their fierce anger. But here, I want to pick out more specifically, but some specific, blessings that were talked about, or that Jacob was installing. So in Genesis 49:10, it says, "The scepter shall not depart from Judah, nor a lawgiver from between his feet." Now this is the interesting part. "Until Shiloh come, and unto him shall the gathering of the people be." Now who is Shiloh?
Is it a he or a place?
It's an interesting question.
Because isn't Shiloh, where, or the name of the first capital before Jerusalem? I may be wrong.
Yeah, I'm not sure about that. Yeah. Well, my understanding here, and again, I like your question, Linda, because you're asking the right questions. Because the answer could be yes. It could be both. And many times that is the case. You got multiple answers here. But as I understand it here, as best as I can, this is talking about the Messiah. So the scepter would be with the tribe of Judah until the Messiah. And then the people would be gathered into the Messiah. But I like what you're saying. It could also have multiple, definitions. So it could be a place, too.
I do believe Shiloh was where the tabernacle was set up in Eden.
Could be.
Yeah, that's-
Yep.
I think that's what I learned when I was at Israel.
Yep. So, all right. Now I can't tell if you go to sleep.
We'll snore.
There you go. All right, now here's another one that I find it's interesting. That is this a blessing? Genesis 49:17 says, "Dan shall be a serpent," and this is the Strong's Concordance number for that. "By the way, an adder in the path that biteth the horse's heels, so that his rider shall fall backward." Now, this word serpent here is used in other different times, in Scripture. And we're going to be referencing some of that. So kind of take note of this. Now, then we also have Genesis 49:22 through 26. Joseph is a fruitful bow, even a fruitful bow, by a well, whose branches run over the wall. The archers have sorely grieved him, and shot at him, and hated him. But his bow abode in strength, and the arms of his hands were made strong by the hands of the mighty God of Jacob. From thence is the shepherd, the stone of Israel. Now, I think that's interesting, stone of Israel, as it relates to possibly Daniel chapter 2 in that statue. A possibility, another one of those theories to run concurrently. "And even by the God of thy father, who shall help thee, and by the Almighty, who shall bless thee with blessings of heaven above, blessings of the deep that lieth under, blessings of the breast and of the womb. The blessings of thy father have prevailed above the blessings of my progenitors, unto the utmost bound of the everlasting hills." So this is over a long period of time. "They shall be on the head of Joseph, and on the crown of the head of him that was separated from his brethren." And I continue to look at this blessing that we see here, and has this been fulfilled? Or is it being fulfilled, and we're just not aware of it? Is the womb of Joseph being blessed as far as through the generations? Is the Lord lifting him up even though he is very hated? And the enemy is constantly coming against him. But the Lord is protecting him and covering him and keeping the enemy from having its full will. It's a good question. And if you notice, I'm living up to my nickname, question mark. All right, now here's the end of the Song of Moses in Deuteronomy. And again, when you look at the commandments, and even with the what we see in the Torah, especially the blessings, to one side and the curses on the other. And Moses is reminding them what's going to happen if they don't follow the commandments, and what's in store for them. And if you really know these things, it's going to be kind of a magnet towards the blessings, and it pushes you away from the curses. But many of us don't know these things, and we continue to suffer the consequences as a result. So, starting in chapter 32, verse 15, but Jeshurun waxed fat and kicked. Thou art waxen fat. Thou art grown thick. Thou art covered with fatness. Then he forsook God which made him, and lightly esteemed the rock of his salvation. And I want to emphasize it, and lightly esteemed the rock of his salvation. They provoked him to jealousy with strange gods. With abominations provoked they him to anger. They sacrificed unto devils, not to gods whom they knew not, to new gods that came newly up, whom your fathers feared not. Of the rock that begat thee, thou art unmindful, and hast forgotten God that formed thee. And when the Lord saw it, he abhorred them, because of the provoking of his sons and of his daughters. And he said, I will hide my face from them. I will see what their end shall be, for they are a very forward generation, children in whom is no faith. They have moved me to jealousy with that which is not God. They have provoked me to anger with their vanities. I will move them to jealousy with those which are not a people. I will provoke them to anger with a foolish nation. So, as we look at the tribes of Israel, if you want to call them the lost tribes, have other nations persecuted those tribes, even the lost tribes? And my definition of lost tribes is all the tribes, or my definition of a lost tribe is if 99% of the genetic people of that tribe would be considered lost. And by my definition, knowing that even if you look at Judah, the tribe of Judah, and when the Assyrians came in and carted off the northern tribes, they also carted off I think it was close to 90% or 80-something% of the tribe of Judah also during the Assyrian reign. But those who were in Jerusalem, behind the defense walls, were not carted off, were not conquered. That came later with that Nebuchadnezzar, and there was taking of most of the people. Some people left, but even those went down to Egypt. With taking Jeremiah with them. So when it came to part of those who were carted off to Babylon, coming back, it was only a remnant. Maybe at the most, 10% of the people, and I don't even think it was 10% came back. Then you had the Greeks came in, and you had the overthrow of the Greeks, and you had the Hasmonean dynasties who went about actually conquering many of the Samaritan lands. And if you would be circumcised and you would, follow the Torah, you were allowed to be called a Jew, no matter what your genetic background was. So again, we have a dwindling down, and then after the conquering by the Romans, I really consider all the tribes as lost tribes by that definition. If 99% of that genetic tribe is no longer recognized as being that tribe, so does that make sense? Question? Yes, sir.
Before you move forward, this may be off base, but
Yep.
did you type this up or copy paste it?
I typed this portion of it up.
Okay.
Yep.
I'm only asking because the word preceding generation in 3220.
Oh no, I copied the scriptures.
So I'm wondering if that word is supposed to be forward or if it's supposed to be something else. Because it's FROWARD.
Okay.
Forward means that they've gone away, they're wandered away.
Right. So when you read it, you said forward,
I misspoke then.
which it changes what that sentence is saying.
Right.
Forward versus forward.
No, thanks.
That was my
Good catch. As that I literally reading is not one of my upper talents.
It's all right. That's why I was first checking to
No,
see
no,
if it was potentially a typo.
No, the actual verses that were copied in.
Okay.
So no, good. Thank you. And if you see anything else, please correct me. So now I'm gonna, for the sake of time, probably not read some of these verses and mainly look at the highlighted ones. But in verse 24, it said, "They shall be burnt with hunger and devoured with burning heat and with bitter destruction. And I will also send the teeth of beasts upon them with the poison of serpents of the dust." Now, one of the things I'm beginning to focus here is on serpents here, and the different times that they pop up, and or vipers and such. It says further down, "For their rock is not as our rock, even our enemies themselves being judges." So these other nations are going to be judging them. Their enemies are going to be judging them. In our own time, does it seem like our enemies are judging us, or our judges sometimes? Just a question. What was that?
No.
"For their vine is of the vine of Sodom, and of the fields of Gomorrah. Their grapes are grapes of Gal. Their clusters are bitter. Their wine is the poison of dragons, and the cruel venom of asp." So this word serpent, coming from the Strong's Concordance H 5172, that we're seeing here, and it comes up again with Dan here. If we look at Jeremiah 8:16, the snorting of his horses was heard from Dan, and the whole land trembled at the sound of the neighing of his strong ones. For they are come and have devoured the land and all that is in it, the city and those that dwell therein. For behold, I will send serpents, cockatrices among you, which will not be charmed, and they shall bite you, saith the Lord. Now, one of the things that's interesting about the tribe of Dan that I'm learning is there were exoduses that happened before Moses' exodus from Egypt. the tribe of Dan was one of them that some of their people left and actually went up to Greece and went to Rome and even made it over to Spain, Ireland, and England supposedly. And this is before Moses exiting Egypt, is what I'm finding out. And really I'm sniffing at Dan here, and I'm not sure exactly where Dan falls in some of this, but a serpent is connected, in his description. So he could be a good guy or he could be a bad guy, depending on the situation in the overall scheme of things.
Mark.
Yeah.
That Deuteronomy 24 and the last two verses that you just talked about.
Yep.
I was thinking, I could be totally wrong. Is it pointing to the serpent that was hung and the vipers biting the people, and they all had to look at the brazen serpent?
It's the same word.
Uh-huh.
What's described of Dan here is the same word as the serpent that was raised, by Moses there in the wilderness. It's the exact same word.
Yeah, I thought it was references to that. So.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, exactly. In fact, we looking here. Yeah, it is Moses' rod turning into a serpent is the same word as mentioned here on this slide. So the serpent of brass that Moses made is the same word. So this the word serpent. I'm kind of pulling out part of the Strong's Concordance, the definition of highlighting a few things because of their application later. But I'm kind of pulling out this snake and the serpent. What's interesting, whisper and magic spell is also part of this definition. Interesting that bronze, that as I understand, that's a bronze serpent that was raised by Moses. So to divine, to learn something through divination, is also associated with this word. Enchantments, divine enchanter. So this is the same word as used in the Garden of Eden here. So it's used in several different places. So, and
where's the crossover between that word referencing serpent and Nahash?
good question. I'm not sure. Another thing to look into. Yeah. Yep. Now, it's interesting if we look into the Newer Testament here, and even the Messiah's, words, or John the Baptist's words, and describing, a people. And John the Baptist says, but when he saw many of the Pharisees and the Sadducees come to his baptism, he said unto them, O generation of vipers, who hath warned thee to flee from the wrath to come? So if we tie this back to, this is a Greek word here, but I think that there is still a tie to the Older Testament word here. All right, and here the tree is known by its fruit. So again, the Messiah, John the Baptist, knew who these people were, by their fruit. And a lot of times, if we want to know a people or know individuals, we don't necessarily listen to their words, because their words can be enchantments directed at us. We watch their actions and see if we can interpret what their motivations are. Is a better guide. So, and here it's we're seeing All right, Matthew 12:33, it says, either make the tree good and his fruit good, or else make the tree corrupt and his fruit corrupt. For the tree is known by his fruit. O generation of vipers, how can ye, being evil, speak good things? For out of the abundance of the heart the mouth speaks. A good man out of the good treasure of the heart bringeth forth good things, and an evil man out of the evil treasure bringeth forth evil things. But I say unto you, that every idle word that men shall speak, they shall give account thereof in the day of judgment. For by thy words thou shalt be justified, and by thy words thou shalt be condemned. So here is the Messiah talking about the scribes and the Pharisees and the words he had. Woe unto you, scribes and Pharisees, hypocrites! For ye compass sea and land to make one proselyte. And when he is made, he maketh him twofold more the child of hell than yourselves. Now, does anybody know what this proselyte, what he's talking about here?
It's like where Yeshua created disciples and apostles. The difference in the word proselyte is they created someone in the image of himself.
Yep. And a lot of these were, I think, possibly tied to the Hasmonean dynasty, where they were, again, if you be circumcised and follow the law, you could be called Jew. So probably multiple meanings here, I think. And it's with these other, we're seeing the converts of other people often bring some of their own twist to things, their own cultures. Now, I'm not saying that's necessarily bad, but in some situations, it can begin to alter the truth in its application and how people begin to, enforce things. So I think here, by allowing these others to be called Jews, if they basically convert, may not have been the right thing to do. It may have skewed the picture some. It might have been better to just call them converts and make a distinction. But as I understand it, they were not making a distinction at that time. You were allowed to be called that. Again, no matter what culture. Now, we do the same thing, and not saying it's wrong in Christianity. If you convert. But I'm sniffing down a trail. I'm running a theory here that some of these different groups that converted may not have fully converted. It's what you can follow on the outside, a set of commandments. For instance, what was being twisted in here is the Talmud. There were many other commandments that this Jewish system was placing on people. And I think that what is being spoken here is these Jews were applying these extra laws that were not part of Scripture. And they were, creating a situation for these proselytes that were far worse than even the original condition. Because it wasn't really following the Torah. They were following man's added commandments. The oral, exactly. So I think that's what it's, speaking to here. And Messiah was addressing that and pointing that out and getting at, dead center. And it says in later verse 33, he says, "Ye serpents, ye generation of vipers, how can you escape the damnation of hell?" Again, are we allowed to add anything to his Torah or take anything away? That's correct. So here's further woes to Pharisees and lawyers. Yep. It says, "And he said, Woe unto you also, ye lawyers, for ye lade men with burdens and grievous to be borne, and ye yourselves touch not the burdens with one of your fingers. Woe unto you." Again, this is where you look at their actions. And does this describe a people, even in our current day? It's a question. So woe unto you, for ye build the sepulchres of the prophets, and your fathers killed them. Now, I'm going to just draw on American history before even going here. For instance, Andrew Jackson was prosecuted by, in the media, in society, by the banking establishment. But he came against them and brought their system down. But what have we done with him on our current money system? And the same thing, Abraham Lincoln. Abraham Lincoln came across, against the, in some ways, towards the end of the Civil War, the banking institution. What happened to him? You realize the first president who there was an attempted assassination of was President Andrew Jackson. Neither pistol fired, and Andrew Jackson ended up beating him over the head into submission with his cane. So, but here we put them on our dollar bills. So I read that again. Woe unto you, for ye build the sepulchres of the prophets, and your fathers killed them. Truly ye bear witness that ye allow the deeds of your fathers, for they indeed killed them, and ye build their sepulchres. Our $50. Whose head is on the $50?
Is it Kennedy?
It is Kennedy. Yep. That the blood of all the prophets, which was shed from the foundation of the world, may be required of this generation. Now this is really interesting here. So in talking about the prophets, from the blood of Abel unto the blood of Zacharias, which perished between the altar and the temple, verily I say unto you, it shall be required of this generation. Now why is Abel included in that? Who killed Abel?
Okay.
I think the blood was still screaming out, so.
Mm-hmm. Correct. So, and again, sometimes we get hints of things. So I take this, in consideration that an opposer was Cain. Is there anything of Cain that's still, affecting us today? It's a question. woe unto you, lawyers. So, why is lawyers, connected with all this description? And these people that have been killed.
Because they were supposed to go to Florida, so.
Mm-hmm. And they also knew the oral law and its application and such, the Talmud and such. So woe unto you, lawyers, for ye have taken away the key of knowledge. That's interesting. They've taken away the key of knowledge. How do you take away a key of knowledge?
You take away the knowledge.
What was that?
You take away the knowledge.
How do you take away knowledge?
You fill their heads with lies, not truth.
Exactly. So they have so many lies they don't know what the truth is. Does that describe today? Ye enter not in yourselves, and them that were entered in ye hindered. And even the scribes are included in in Messiah's rebuke here, and a couple of different passages here. And he said unto them in his doctrine, beware of the scribes, which love to go in long clothing, and love salutations in the marketplaces, and the chief seats in the synagogues, and the uppermost rooms at feasts, which devour widows' houses, and for a pretense make long prayers. These shall receive greater damnation. Also, it says, then in the audience of all the people, he said unto his disciples, beware of the scribes, which desire to walk in long robes, and love greetings in the markets, and the highest seats in the synagogues, and the chief rooms at feasts, which devour widows' houses, and for a show make long prayers. The same shall receive greater damnation. So, how are widows' houses being devoured?
Demanding tribute.
The scribes are demanding tribute that the widows can barely supply.
Mm-hmm. Are they either by interest or by taxation being moved out of being able to, exist in their homes?
Something of that nature.
Yeah. So Matthew 23:15, woe unto you, scribes and Pharisees, hypocrites, for ye compass sea and land to make one proselyte, and when he is made, ye make him twofold more the child of hell than yourselves. We read this earlier. So again, under the Hasmonean dynasty, the Pharisees and scribes, as I mentioned before, had made many proselytes and declared, again, as I said before, if you would be circumcised, or if you would, and you would follow the Torah, well, not the Torah, but if you would follow the law, you'd be called a Jew. So this is where I begin to make a separation between those who are Judahites, which are in genetic descendants of Judah, and those called Jews. And a definition difference between those who are following mysticism. Many things of the Talmud are more mysticism. And again, you're starting to get closer to divination. with the Talmud. And again, that serpent tie as a result. Any questions? All right, and it's interesting here that even the proselyte, I guess it's proselyte, but I'm saying proselyte, but it's proselyte, is used in Acts. It says, and this is, at Pentecost, when the people saw the 120 that were in the upper room come out, and they were hearing them speak in their own language. And verse 5 says, and there were dwelling at Jerusalem Jews, devout men out of every nation under heaven. Now, when this was noised abroad, the multitude came together and were confounded, because that every man heard them speak in his own language. And they were amazed and marveled, saying one to another, Behold, are not all these which speak Galileans? And how hear we every man in our own language, wherein we were born? Parthians and Medes, Elamites, and the dwellers of Mesopotamia, and in Judea, and Cappadocia, and Pontus and Asia, Phrygia, I may be pronouncing this incorrectly, and Pamphylia, in Egypt, and in the parts of Libya, out of Crete, and strangers of Rome, Jews and proselytes. So, in Crete and Arabians, we do hear them speak in our tongues the wonderful works of God. And they were all amazed and were in doubt, saying one to another, What meaneth this? Others mocking said, These men are full of new wine. But Peter, standing up with the 11, lifted up his voice and said unto them, now interesting, who is he speaking to here? He says.
Indiana, Judea.
Correct. And all ye that dwell in Jerusalem. But before, there are many others from other nations. But he's not necessarily addressing them here with his wording. Be this known unto you, and hearken to my words. For these are not drunken, as ye suppose, saying it is but the third hour of the day. But this is that which was spoken by the prophet Joel. And it shall come to pass in the last days. And again, the last days here doesn't mean, as it talks about in the book of Revelation or such, but these are, were included, Messiah's times were included as a description of the last days. Saith God, I will pour out my spirit upon all flesh, and your sons and your daughters shall prophesy, and your young men shall see visions, and your old men shall dream dreams. And on my servants and on my handmaids I will pour out in those days of my spirit, and they shall prophesy. And I will show wonders in the heaven above, and signs in the earth beneath, blood and fire and vapor of smoke. The sun shall be turned into darkness, the moon into blood, before that great and notable day of the Lord come. And it shall come to pass that whosoever shall call on the name of the Lord shall be saved. Again, he says, to all these different nations, or what does he say next? You men of Israel. So he's not necessarily addressing the proselytes here.
This was at Pentecost.
Yes.
That is one of the 3 times that all the men have to go to the temple.
That's correct.
And the disciples were in the temple that day, they would not have missed that.
Hmm.
So they may have been speaking inside the court to the men, even though the men outside the court that were not Jews could hear them.
That's correct. You're right. Yeah.
I think it's 3 and 4 said that proselytes were some of those people that were actually talking whatever tongue they gave them.
Mhm.
Yeah.
That's what it says, so.
They were hearing it in all their own tongues.
This, Peter's response is to what the people were saying in the 4:1, so.
Now, this can, you know, at this point, the Israelites had gone into all the nations. So there are multiple possibilities here. There's a possibility that these ones, even though they were born in other nations, they could be Israelites.
Well, they came for the feast, so.
But they also could be proselytes, yeah, proselytes, thank you, that were not, they could be converts, but not necessarily Israelites.
Or it could have been those that ran the tables that got flipped later.
And they could be proselytes that were following the Talmud, the oral, you know, the oral law.
Until that day.
Correct. Yep. And then have a choice whether to convert from that or not. Oops. And it says, you know, further down that chapter, in Peter speaking, therefore let all the house of Israel know assuredly that God hath made that same Jesus whom ye have crucified, both Lord and Christ. So again, the house of Israel is being identified here. And in verse 40, and with many other words did he testify and exhort, saying, save yourself from this untoward generation. So what would be the untoward generation? What are you saving yourself from here? Any ideas?
The lies.
Correct. Yep. Man system, man created law. Save yourself from it. And it's interesting that if you look at Acts 6, when it's talking about you know, these disciples, these deacons that were picked to serve, you have a list of, you know, the different deacons that were picked, but only one of them receives an additional description. Why don't the other ones receive an additional description? Again, I look at these as being hints. You know, why is, you know, is that Nicholas? Why is he being identified, called out here with more information? So he's a proselyte of Antioch. Anybody know anything more of what has been said that came from this individual later in his life, or the group that was formed?
Is that Nicolaitans?
Again, that's what I've heard. So what were the Nicolaitans?
They're mentioned in Revelations, one of the churches, right?
Mm-hmm. Correct.
And I think they are, I know I've studied this. They don't present the truth correctly.
Correct.
It's misconstrued. Yes. Kind of to tickle your fancy instead of being what was really commanded.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, and they definitely skewed the truth.
Yes.
And into something that it wasn't. Almost like what the Talmud does. And they created a lifestyle that certainly did not agree with the scriptures in their interpretation. And I don't know how, if you can count them as Gnostic, but again, proselyte. It's interesting that the word Antioch also is mentioned here. And Antioch, as I understand it, was the first church to have a bishop of their church. It was this. The first bishop was supposedly Peter, but the second bishop of Antioch was not of Israelite descendant. Was a proselyte, and as I understand it, and that church in Antioch was the first church who rebelled against the council in Jerusalem before the destruction of Jerusalem, and declared themselves as they did not, that all churches were autonomous. They did not have to submit to the authority of the council in Jerusalem. And they became, as I understand it, a parallel, kind of a competing group against what was being published out of the Council of Jerusalem. It might be partially the reason we have so many different Greek scriptures coming out of Antioch. And many of the possibly scriptures written in Hebrew may have been destroyed out of this competition that was going on. And again, I was always raised that Antioch was the center of all, Christianity and the writings and such. But I'm finding out additional information about Antioch.
Wasn't Antioch a pretty much a complete Roman type city?
Greek, yeah. I mean, I was really a Greek oriented city. So, correct.
So how long was it
You're right. Yep. All right. Now we're beginning to, all of that was kind of a setup for beginning to talk about 3 additional books. And the reason I went and talked about the serpent, proselytes, and such, I personally believe that one of my theories is that there are additional scriptures besides what we just find, in our canon. And some things, there are different canons, and the 3 books I'm talking about over today and the next couple of days are included in some groups' canons. The second Esdras is one of them. The Book of Jubilees is another, and even I don't know if the proper pronunciation is the Didache or Didache is another, but these are included in some groups' canons. But one of the things that a personal theory I have is that the current canon we have was truncated in order to hide some things and keep you from figuring things out. But also, they were done to more easily control people. And if you, the most dangerous enemy that there is the one you don't know about. And some of these additional things, better explain who the enemy is. And the enemy doesn't want you necessarily to know who he is. the more they can stay hidden and to keep from being discovered and others not know of them, they're far more dangerous. So I think it's interesting that now this is taken from a snapshot from a channel called the God Culture is where this is. But there are, if you look at Second Esdras, and Second Esdras was, as I understand it, the Messiah was quoting from Second Esdras. And many of the doctrines that some of our that are really the backbone of some of our Newer Testament scriptures. This is listing a number of different passages that seem to connect to Second Esdras. And let me bring up Second Esdras.